So we're just going to go one level deeper on our troubleshooting. We're going to look at using something like tcpdump to look at the data at a network level. So sometimes the logging doesn't really give you enough information. You just got to dig a little bit deeper. So first, we're going to use the tcpdump command, but you can see it's not here. So I'm going to use yum to install it. So we're going to use yum tcpdump or install tcpdump, and that should install tcpdump. It should be pretty quick. It's a relatively small package. And once that's done, now I can run tcpdump, and it's just going to start dumping all the information about TCP traffic. Now, of course, that's not terribly useful. It's just flying by there super fast. You know, there's a lot of traffic on port 22 right now, for example. So first, I'm going to tell it I only want to capture traffic on port 80 because that's all I care about, right? So now it's only going to capture traffic on port 80. So if I come back over here on the left side and I refresh this web page, so you can see it's now starting to give me some information, right? It's starting to dump all kinds of information about what's happening. Again, it's still a lot of information. It's not terribly useful. But if you recall from the lecture about TCP, there's some things you should recognize in here. Let me just Control-C this. So some things you should recognize. You see the sequence numbers. You see the acknowledgement numbers. So you can see how these different segments are related to each other, right? Again, we're using TCP here. Oops, let me go back to the bottom. So you know we're using TCP here. Let me just... Sorry, somehow my window disappeared on the bottom. But you can see those sequence numbers. You can see the acknowledgement numbers. We can see the window size. We can see the length of the packet. You can see the flags that are set. That's right here. So you can start to kind of see some of the things that might be interesting about the segments. There are similar tools we can use at the IP layer. So we learned about these different layers in the TCP/IP model. This is obviously looking at layer 4, so this is looking at the TCP layer, not the application layer. But if we want to see the payload of these packets, we could, in theory, do that. So let me just go back here and run tcpdump on port 80, and let's add -S0 is going to say, just give me everything. Don't give me just the packet header, right? So this is cutting it off, so we're only seeing a certain portion of it. But I can say, give me everything, and I can say output it somewhere. So for example, put it in temp http.cap because I'm trying to capture HTTP traffic. I can run that, come back over here, I'm going to refresh this page, and it should be outputting a bunch of data right now. Of course, I can't see it because I'm outputting it into that output file. But if I want to take a look at what we captured, I can just use the cat command to capture it. So we're going to use cat to look at temp http.cap. And there it is. So now we're seeing a lot more information, right? We're seeing the raw data coming from the web browser and what the web browser is getting back from the server. So this can kind of help us troubleshoot a little bit. Some of it looks like kind of junk in here because they're control characters that aren't really interpreted in ASCII. So it's kind of a collection of hexadecimal characters that really don't map to any particular character. But then when you see commands and things like that are passed as ASCII, they show up in plain text here. Sometimes you need other applications to process some of this data, right? So when you get these packet captures, sometimes you have to use other utilities to try to figure out what's happening. But what I wanted you to see here is, I wanted to use a simple example, so I called that data page directly instead of using the front end application, because it just gives us a simple payload in JSON that we can see how. For example, I can't tell from this browser that it's JSON or JavaScript, but here, I can see the content type, right? That's in the header for the browser. It even tells me the version of Apache. It tells me I'm using CentOS, right? We talk about a lot of this stuff in network security courses, about how these banners can reveal a lot of information. This is how something like Nmap, for example, I talk about that in the lecture. Something like Nmap could discern exactly what service you're running, as an example. So you can play around with this command, and you could also, just like we did before, you could actually just have it display in real time. So I could take this part out, and now as it's running, come over here, I'm going to refresh the page, and you'll just see it'll start outputting all this stuff in real time, right to the screen. So you can play around with this, but that's TCP dump, a little bit about how it works and how we use it for troubleshooting.